Hey people, John here from Fast Films, and today we're going through a 2017 thriller movie called Blood Hunt. The starting scene flips off in a dark space where the camera shows a ragged-looking man dragging a girl. His anger and frustration are visible through the expressions. After lingering on for some time, he asks to lay her down. After a moment, the freak starts ripping off her clothes and proceeds to rape her. The girl hits his face and pushes it away, but the guy smacks her hard and everything blacks out. It's 6 a.m. now. The scenario shifts to a girl who wakes up in the morning and follows her usual fresh-up routine. As she prepares herself, the camera pans to another guy who's returning from work. He gets in the car while the girl prepares breakfast in the house. The guy starts driving and sends a text to his girlfriend, whose expressions beam happiness upon receiving it. In the meantime, the guy arrives at her house and lights up a cigarette, but as soon as she walks out from the door, he instantly throws it away. Afterwards, he helps her put the luggage in the car, and as they get seated inside, the girl greets him and gives him breakfast. He savors it down and the girl eyes him admirably. Before embarking on their journey, the guy changes his work suit into a casual fit and they leave for the tour. They travel through the cities and highways off to the suburbs and the meadows. Both of them enjoy the feel of the road and the magnificence of the landscape. During the drive, the girl, named Claire, tells her boyfriend about her pregnant friend. The guy, named Dean, tries to assess if Claire is pregnant, but she simply denies it, upon which Dean takes a sigh of relief, remarking that he doesn't want kids. Claire's expressions turn gloomy, but she tries to change the topic by stating a course she just got enrolled in, but Dean doesn't want her to go. The discussion ruins both of their moods and Dean admonishingly states that he doesn't want to talk about it. The rest of the journey passes in silence until they come across a mart. Claire proceeds inside to grab the snacks and returns in a cheery mood. Therefore, they continue their journey again, but this time in a bright spirit. Their drive then takes them into a town where Dean seems lost. Claire jokes about him, but he doesn't admit that he's lost. Finally, they find a gas station, and as Dean fills up the car, Claire advances towards the restroom. After a while, she returns and sits in the empty car, but suddenly a grave-looking man approaches the window and asks her for a lighter. She states she doesn't smoke, but the guy insists for the lighter available in the car. Claire gets annoyed by the forced intrusion and tries to sway him off, but the man bangs on the window and threatens Claire. Suddenly, Dean appears on the scene and gives him the lighter. He lights up the cigarette and gives it back to Dean while glaring at Claire. Nevertheless, they leave the station while the man discusses them with his friend. In the meantime, Claire complains to Dean about his kindness with the creep. Dean states that you shouldn't mess with such guys and continues the drive. After a while, they arrive at the motel and proceed inside. Dean drops on the bed and invites Claire over, and they melt into one another. The next morning, Dean returns with breakfast while Claire happily devours it and drinks the coffee. Afterwards, Dean offers to go for a hike and Claire jumps up in happiness. As they leave the motel, the roads take the turns to an open, secluded area, and in the middle of nowhere, they see a car parked beside the road with its hood open. Dean parks his own car right behind it in order to help, but it's revealed that it's the same creep from the gas station whose car is broken down. Claire immediately gets alerted and urges Dean to leave at once. As Dean insists to help, Claire shouts at him, stating that the freak threatened her. Expressions of concern immediately appear on Dean's face, and he swerves the car around and leaves the man hanging there. After some time, they arrive at the hill forest and the couple starts their hike. They travel through the wonderful woods, snap pictures, embrace each other adorably, and make it to the top. Upon reaching the peak, they sit together and enjoy the strong and fresh gusts of wind running through their hair. After spending a good amount of time, they decide to leave and return back to the hotel room. On their drive back, Dean's car starts to overheat and he parks it on a side and checks the radiator. Upon finding it empty, he takes the coolant and fills the car up, but finds a leakage underneath the radiator. As he hunkers down, Dean spots another car coming down the road and it parks behind them. A fat man approaches Dean and asks about the problem. Dean gets up and states that he's just filling the coolant when the hoodlum from the gas station comes to face him. Dean states that he wants no trouble, but the man starts trash talking. In the meantime, a third guy comes by Claire's door and she suddenly recognizes the bald guy and a chill runs up her spine. Back outside, the trash talking escalates and the man abuses Claire. Dean is outraged and he lands a massive punch on the man's face and a fight breaks out. One ginger head guy drags Claire outside while Dean fights with the other two. He manages to break free and come to Claire's rescue when suddenly the ginger grabs him and pushes him in the car. Dean grabs a glass bottle and smashes it in the ginger's head, eventually knocking him down. Devastated and flustered, Dean urges Claire to get back in the car immediately and they leave at once. Unfortunately, the devil doesn't leave them and the guy starts to follow them in the car. Terror crawls up their bones as the thug nears them and Dean spots the car's engine overheating once again. Nevertheless, he presses hard on the pedal and accelerates ahead. Their chase turns from the highway to the suburban trails where the guy stays on their tail. Dean manages to dodge him but not for long. As their car speed ahead, Dean spots a side area and he swerves the car hard to the right and they manage to evade their hunter. Upon the evasion, the couple takes a sigh of relief but suddenly, the thug runs into them from another side and the chase continues. Ultimately, Dean's car starts to overheat and slows down until the ruffian comes beside them. Their cars collide and in one hard push, Dean's car is thrown into the air and rolled multiple times where it ends up upside down. After the dust settles, Claire wakes up, badly injured and finds Dean unconscious. Suddenly, the man comes from behind and drags Claire away while she screams on top of her lungs. After a blackout, both of them wake up in the back of the car, tied up. Claire whimpers in fright and pain while Dean tries to console her. She doesn't listen to a word and keeps on crying, but Dean manages to make her approach the toolbox placed on the edge. After fondling through the tools, Dean hands her an iron cutter and encourages her to cut her ropes. Just then, the car stops and the thugs pull them out. The fat guy scoops Claire up and puts her over the shoulder while Dean gets dragged into a wooden shed. Both of them get tied up to the posts and the ginger head wraps a barbed wire around Dean's neck. In the meantime, the creeps approach Claire and trace the knife across her belly. The couple's pleas ring around the shed but the thugs continue with their ruthlessness. As Dean's neck starts to bleed, they torture him by pouring water on his face through a cloth. He goes breathless and the leader proceeds to strangle him, but after a while, he orders the others to hang him up. The ginger head, named Jared, takes off his iron wire while the fat guy, named Heath, nears Claire, whose situation is getting worse by every passing minute. On the other hand, Jared ties up Dean and Heath lifts him up via a hook until he hangs upside down. Then the beating starts and all of them land blows on his stomach until his mouth starts bleeding. In the meantime, Claire finally manages to cut free of the ropes and escapes from behind while helplessly watching her boyfriend getting beaten up. Suddenly, the thugs realize that she's escaped and they run outside to look for her. The main leader orders Heath to look around while Jared runs inside to grab his rifle. In the meantime, the camera pans to Claire who's hiding behind cars and other stuff while Heath and the others hunt for her. She scoops from place to place and hides successfully until Jared spots her via the rifle scope and shoots at her. Afterwards, he shouts her location and everyone starts chasing her. Heath catches up to her but she cuts him and runs across a barbed fence to sit in a car. The guys surround her as she locks it. Claire whimpers in fright and tries to start the car but the swine laughs around, stating to let her do what she wants. Unfortunately, the car is a manual and Claire can't manage to drive it so she just wails in there helplessly. In the interim, the hoodlum orders Jared to bring out Dean. As he's dragged outside, Jared puts a knife to his throat and Claire gets the order to come out in the count of 3. Helpless and scared, she staggers out and they get dragged back into the shed. Inside, they strap Dean once again while Claire gets raped by Heath at the pole. As Dean watches in utter anguish and desperation, his fury enables him to break free of the ropes. In a single sweep, he picks up a rod and knocks Heath out with a strong blow. He then holds Claire, covers her up while she throws up and squeals in trauma. Dean consoles her and drags her outside where they manage to leave the shed and run towards the car. But unfortunately, Jared spots them in his scope and starts firing. Luckily, Dean starts the car just in time and manages to drive away from the junkyard. Both of them take a sigh of relief but it is suddenly revealed that Claire is shot on her side and her stomach is bleeding out. As Dean spots her wound, he immediately stops the car and lays her outside where she bleeds out and gives up on life in his arms. Dean is sheerly devastated and shattered. The fury of revenge starts to bubble up in him and he drives back to the junkyard. Upon arriving, he stops at a distance and runs up to the area while holding a dagger. Meanwhile, we see Jared working on a car. He starts it and sits on the driver's seat when Dean suddenly raids him from the side and attacks him. They indulge in a fight and Jared tries to strangle him with the seatbelt but Dean thrusts the dagger in his thigh. The struggle continues and Dean drops outside the car and just as Jared starts to crawl outside, Dean bangs the car door straight on his head and his body goes lifeless. In the meantime, Heath comes upon looking for his friend and finds him dead. His partner also comes outside and they conclude that Dean is back. As they both go around looking for him, Dean grabs a shovel from behind and cuts at Heath's leg from behind. The fatty drops to the ground and Dean smashes his head into a pulp. Afterwards, he grabs the knife and advances to the shed where the leader is already waiting for him. The lunatic starts laughing menacingly and Dean charges at him. The fight starts and the maniac overcomes Dean but he successfully manages to break free after hitting him with a heavy iron pivot. Afterwards, he climbs on his chest and lands punch after punch on his face until the guy becomes a mess of blood and broken bones. As he goes limp, Dean ties an iron chain around his feet and drags him away to hook him upside down. With that, the movie reaches its ending moment as Dean hangs him up and leaves him there. Afterwards, he silently staggers out of the shed, walking away in exhaustion, and the film comes to an end. Thanks for watching, guys.